Hello and welcome to the first ISM Talks videocast 2019. Usually ISM Talks is in a podcast format, but this particular format today, or this particular topic today, is definitely better explored with some visuals. Okay, we're going to focus today on one of our learning principles, and this is learning is planned to build upon and develop the knowledge, skills and understanding of all learners. And the key word there is that second to last word, all learners. What we're going to be focusing on is a particular shape, and that shape is a triangle, the most important shape in education, it could be argued. This shape represents something called the data triangle, and it's a three-point shape that allows us to explore student progress and ask questions around why students are making progress or not. We can think of this in terms of maps. Children and human beings generally are complicated things, and we need some help with trying to work out where they're at, what they need to do to improve, where their thinking is at on different levels. So triangles and maps are the key focus for today's little videocast. Let's return to this then, the data triangle. What do we mean by this? Okay, so the data triangle has 3 points on it. Here they are. The first point is attainment. Now you will be very used to this word attainment. What we're referring to here are the grades or the numbers that are attached to a student's progression. So in class 7, 8 and 9, this will be on a scale of 1 to 7. In 10 and 11, this is now on a scale of A star to U, which matches the GCSE or IGCSE course. And in IB, the International Baccalaureate, which is a 16 to 18 course, this is also on a scale from 1 to 7. So attainment is the number that's attached to their progress. Our second point on the triangle is our attitude. So what do we mean by attitude? Well, attitude is all about their attitude towards their studies. And there's different measures of this that we can look at. The third point on the triangle, and one of the key ones that we're sharing with you today to try and inform you and educate you on one of the things that we're doing here, is aptitude. How do we measure where they should be at? How do we know what they should be attaining so that when we look at their attainment, we can work out if they are actually where they should be or not? And if they're not, what can we do about that? So, here we go. Let's take each one of these things in turn. Attainment we've talked about already, and that's fairly straightforward. Most of you will be very familiar and comfortable with attainment levels. The second thing that we want to look at is attitude, previously mentioned. So what kinds of things are we talking about here? Well, with regard to attitude, we're looking at their attendance in school. Extremely important. There are key and correlated links between how much attendance or how much time children spend in school and their progress. If they don't come to school, surprise, surprise, they don't tend to make as much progress. Their attitude towards their learning. So we can measure this in terms of their merits, in terms of their sanctions, teacher input, their attitude towards their learning scores on their reports, and various different measures such as that. And of course, teacher observations. We spend a lot of time with these kids and we look at them every day. So what do we see as teachers? So all of that is our attitude. Finally, we have our aptitude, the third point on the triangle. And this potentially is the most complicated. So here we go. Let me try and explain it to you. The aptitude, again, is the measure of where they should be at or what they should be capable of. Now, there is some very clever science behind this. And when we look at aptitude, the school uses something called CHEM, which is the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring, which was created a little while ago by Durham University. It is the most used aptitudinal test in the world, and quite literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students around the world sit what are called the CHEM tests, or CHEM aptitudinal tests, every single year. It's seen as a best practice in schools around the world. These would include your well-known private schools in the UK, to your best international schools around the world, to state education systems also use this. So what we're trying to do here is use the chem test to get an idea of what they're capable of. The chem tests are split into 3 to 4 different batteries. And by a battery, that means a sort of set of questions. So we're just going to keep it simple and we'll stick with 3. So when children take the chem test, they look at vocabulary. And the tests on the vocabulary basically explore their extent of their vocabulary in English, their ability to think through things in English, their word fluency in English. Now, of course, many of our children, English is their second or third or fourth language, but having this test is still very, very useful because it establishes their understanding in English and the breadth of their vocabulary, so we are then able to assess whether we need to build that within their history lesson or their maths lesson or their science lessons, because many of them will not be or not need to be on specific English support. Of course, this is also the one that's most linked to cultural identity, and we are very, very aware of that when they take the test. The second battery is mathematics. Now, anybody around the world can take the mathematics test, and it is not linked to any particular curriculum on content. It looks at manipulating number, and it looks at logical thinking. So this helps us to understand their capability, the innate capability in maths. Once we know that, that can help us to assist them within the classroom. The third battery is definitely the most difficult to explain, but essentially what this is non-verbal problem solving. And this is all about their ability to recognize shapes, match patterns, have spatial awareness, visual intuition, and it's most linked to analysis and can be quite a good predictor of performance with things like analysis in English or higher order thinking or problem solving in mathematics and science. Very, very useful when we compare it to their verbal score or their vocab score, and we'll go through that in a second. Now, there is also a fourth battery for the younger children, which is about how well they can do things under time pressure, but I'm going to kind of skip over that one quite quickly. Okay. Each of those batteries is given a score, and the score at the low end or the lowest end is 50. The score at the highest end is 150. So these scores are standardized around the world, with 100 being bang in the middle. What we can do then is we can separate them into quartiles, stanines, and percentiles, but let's just stick to quartiles for now. So the bottom 25% in any of those 4 or 3 batteries would be placed in band D. The top 25% would be based in band A. Each child is also given an overall score where you take all of those batteries together, and again they would be assigned band D, band C, band B, or band A. So what? Why do we do this? Well, the key reason is that it helps us to better understand each student. The biggest fear here, and I can understand why it would be a fear, is that this test is used to label students. And this is absolutely, and I can't say this strongly enough, not the purpose of the chem test. The chem test is to work out what their starting point is so that we can help them to improve from that starting point. And actually we can measure that as well when it comes to things like IGCSE or IB exams. It's an incredibly powerful tool when it's used properly. So now I'm going to be brave and try and give you a slight insight into how it might be used. Please bear in mind that a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So if you have questions or thoughts, you can make an appointment with myself or Miss Gettle, who is the Assistant Head of Secondary, or Miss Dupont, who is the Assistant Head of Secondary for 7 to 9. And we'd very happily take you through this in a little bit more detail. Now, we do not share this data with parents. It's too complicated. There's too many things going on here for it to be shared. but we're very happy to talk about individual students on a one-on-one situation with parents where it can be explored and explained. In fact, this is very healthy, and I've had a number of conversations over the last year in order to do so. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a look at a student profile. And remember, this is a triangle. So here we are in student A in class 7, and we're going to look at their aptitude, their attitude, and their attainment. So let's have a look. We'll start with the aptitude part of our triangle, in other words, the chem scores. Now this is a class 7 student, so there are 4 batteries. And as we can see, in the vocab 99, so that's in quartile C, but it's almost bang in the middle. Their math score is relatively low, and that's in the bottom quartile, so band D. Their non-verbal is right in the middle of what you'd expect in a worldwide cohort, which is band B. And their skills, that was the one that we skipped over, that's their ability to do things quickly under time, is 85, quite low, band D. Overall, this is a band D student. Now, underneath is a nice little graph. What we're interested in is those bars where they do not overlap. So you can see the math score there is very, very low on that bar when you compare it to the non-verbal and the vocabulary. So that allows us to ask some good questions about it. Do we need to use the vocab more to help them with the maths? Their non-verbal problem solving should, in theory, be quite good, but is their basic number work not yet good enough to allow them to access that higher order thinking? Because you can see in the non-verbal there, they're right in the middle. So there's a correlation between those two things. Now, this takes a lot of training and a lot of practice, but you get the idea, hopefully. All right, now let's have a look at their attainment. So we see that this is a child who potentially could struggle a little bit, and we're going to need to try and find the keys to unlock them. Let's have a look at the attainment and see if that matches. So this is on the 1 to 7 scale, and we can see, look, mathematics there scoring a 2. This makes sense. Look at their math score is 77. It's a band D. Now, what do we do with that? Well, what we don't do is we just sit back and say, okay, well, fine, they're not very good at maths, let's just leave them at that. What we do is we can see there that the math score matches the attainment score. So in other words, we're not going to place too high a target on this child. We're going to work on incrementally improving them. And like I said before, if we compare that to the aptitude, how might we do that? Well, we might look at some basic number work to allow them to explore the non-verbal skills that they have later on. Now, let's pretend that that math score was very high on the chem test. So let's imagine a number of 127. And then we looked at the mathematics score on the attainment, which is a 2. That's a problem. And that would mean that we would be doing something wrong there. And we need to find out very quickly what it is. There are some successes here. Look, PE attainment is very, very high, which is excellent. And the rest is sort of across the middle. Art and drama are pretty good. Geography, history aren't particularly high, and I would say there that this is something that we should be pushing with both the vocab and the non-verbal. So now let's bring in the effort or the attitudinal testing. Okay, so here we go. The attitude looks like it's a little bit inconsistent. We've got lots of very goods, which is not our top level. But that means that they're trying. In French, inconsistent. In ICT, a little bit inconsistent. Learning support is good, so actually that's right in the middle. So the attitude initially seems okay. And the teacher comments as chatty with friends but reluctant to share ideas in whole class discussions. Polite and willing but shy and should ask for help when needed. So this is a child who might struggle. Their chem data suggests that they might struggle. They have good vocab, but they seem quite shy. And their attitudinal data is okay, but inconsistent. So what we might say for this child is, well, let's actually work on some one-on-one conversations. If they're shy and they don't ask for help, let's go and see them and make sure that help is what comes to them rather than the other way around. Now, this is very interesting when you take the names off the students, because it makes you ask these questions as a teacher. And we do this in our training, and then at the very end, we put the name back on. And the teachers will often do two things. One will be, oh, that makes sense. Or the second one will be, I need to think a little bit differently about this child. And that's the power of the data triangle. Okay, I'm going to try one more, just take you through that one more time. And again, just be careful, this is not easy. It takes lots and lots of training to do it. So we've got here a different profile. Student B, it's also a Year 7 student. Have a look at this one. You'll notice straight away that, look at that, vocab 137, overall 139, band A, nonverbal 127. Have a look at that chart there. This child is in the top quartile and is at the top of the top quartile. So we've got, in theory here, a very, very capable child. Let's have a look at their attainment. Now, what do you see there? We've got some 5s, we've got a few 7s, we've got a few 6s, some more 5s, and their attitude is okay. But those reds there, you can see that attitude has actually dropped down over time. The overview of the teacher comments is confident, motivated, participates well, but tempted to rush and does not always check for errors. Now, with a bit of experience, I know that the rushing and not always checking for errors is sometimes sometimes something that happens with kids who are very, very capable. They want to get to the end, they want to get on to the next thing. I would say that if we look at this profile in terms of attainment, perhaps this child is not being pushed hard enough. And if we didn't have that chem data, we might not know that. We might sit back and say, oh, this kid's doing fine. I'm not sure that this kid is doing as well as they could be doing based on those scores. And again, by taking the name off, by exploring it, by asking questions, and that question there is really, are we pushing this child hard enough? Then we put the name back on, and that light bulb might certainly flick on. So, there we go. That is just dipping our toe in the water. All of our children from class 7 all the way through to class 13 take the chem standardized tests. Chem tests, which are then give us standardized scores. You can see how useful and helpful this is. For you as parents, is it useful? Well, maybe, but only really if you are given the full context and the discussion around your child's data. If you don't have that, the risk is, we fall back into that phrase, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So, it's important that we give you that overview. If you have any more questions, please do get in touch. I hope that made sense. And remember, the most important shape in education is the triangle.